Hi, so it was a bit of a funny story that I had to reflect on when I had to think about the micro level variation for one of my speech communities. And I grew up in Elsa, but I went to school in La Villa, which is just literally like 5 minutes away from Elsa or Red Couch Elsa. And and I had to remember when when the students would create Spanish words out of English words. That was just something common to do, and it was for fun, and sometimes it just became just regular language use. So the town of La Villa was named because the railroad tracks go through it. So La Villa del Tren goes through it, so that's where it got its name. And the railroad tracks kind of became a popular site for fights. So when there was going to be a fight, it was a big deal, and they would announce it, va haber fight en los traques. So they'd add the to fight, or to the railroad tracks, they'd say traques and fight it. So when we think about that now, that we're adults, and we think about that in junior high and high school, we laugh about it. Va haber fight en los traques. And so everyone knew what that was about. But when I went back to my hometown and I talked to people in my hometown and I would mention those kinds of stories, they'd look at me kind of puzzled, like, fight really? Traques? So even though it was not that far away, it was something that was just relevant to people from La Villa, which at Calchelsa people looked down on because it was different. But that's one of the variants that I remembered, and usually it was the people who were in the fights or who were advocating the fights that would use that type of lingo more. When I was thinking about the community of practice categories as a teacher, I have seen this, where groups of students that they identify to a particular community of practice. It sadly also happens like with a separation of students. So I know that I'd hear some of the kids say, oh, son los English kids. Those are the English kids. Like, don't associate with them, or we are at odds. Kind of sentiment that they had. So sometimes, because they felt looked down on, that was their form of rebelling, and they wouldn't want to speak like the English kids. So they would either speak all Spanish, or they would just mix the languages even more than the students that did not know Spanish. And that was a way to kind of distance themselves, and kind of a way to show some sort of toughness with the other students. And on the other side of the spectrum, I'd also see students, who were, I guess, rude about it, because they'd say, why are they speaking Spanish? Speak English. You're in the United States. And they didn't want to try Spanish, even though their parents, were of Mexican descent, even though their parents may have, been the first ones to be in the United States. It was just something that we saw as a way of distancing themselves, in some cases as a way of showing status. That's one way for sure in the classroom that I would see it and try to mediate. And that's when I would go back into historical context and about valuing our languages and our differences as well. As far as the article on the question about ethnic consciousness and gender identity, ethnic consciousness, I hope I'm not reading too much into it, but what I saw being represented was that the girls with the I sound were affiliating themselves in a raza term, like some sort of pride in their ethnic identity still. But as far as the gender identity, I did see where there were the non-traditional gender habits. So they broke away from the traditional, gender habits of the girls, staying at home and, being the good girl. They went into the non-traditional gender habits of fighting, of staying out late. I believe one of the phrases was horrifying parents, being, again, the non-typical, girl. So that's what I picked up from the readings.